I'll continue build workflows. So number one, all you do is drag and drop an activity into the design area. You can configure them and then connect them, so you can connect multiple activities together. Designing forms, I'd say almost every workflow is using the display form activity. It's probably the most used activity in workflows. So we'll be playing around with those display forms. And then saving, you'll be able to then, if you sign in with an Esri identity, save these workflows directly to ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS as a content ID, and then begin sharing it with others. So running workflows again, I'll be reviewing how to run a workflow inside of Web AppBuilder as well as inside of Geocortex tools. And if you're wanting to learn more, so I'm just going to click Get Started. If you ever want to see that orientation again, I think you can navigate to the Help section here and click Welcome. So that will, if you're ever wanting to view that orientation again, just go navigate to the Help and click Welcome. If you want to see what's new, that'll take you to the Documentation Center and show you some of the new features and functionality that we've introduced. If we go to the key concepts, that'll take you to the key concepts about workflows. So again, there's tons of documentation available, and we make it fairly easy. I think there's tutorials as well for learning how to create workflows. Activities, it'll take you to the activities reference in the Documentation Center. And you'll see here, there's an activity reference area. So all of our activities, our 175 activities, have their own documentation. So here I'll see the add features activity. It's got a description, maybe how you might use it, if it supports offline functionality, and the various properties that are required to run it. So here we've got inputs, so the add features activity requires a URL of a string type. It also requires some graphics, optionally a geodatabase version, and optionally a timeout. And then the output is a results. This will typically be like an Esri feature set or something like that. So each activity has its own documentation associated with it. If you want to go to the toolbox, these are all the activities, right? There's 175 activities. They range from programming logic, such as like if statements, to alerts or display forms, buffering area, doing some calculations, geocoding, projecting different types, querying relationships, running geoprocessing tools, getting feature set extents. So what else? Creating feature sets, performing feature editing. So you saw in that damage assessment workflow, I was adding, deleting, and updating features, right? We've got activities for each of these, and each of these activities have their own unique properties associated with them. Let me just kind of go through a couple of these. We've got some activities specific to Web AppBuilder for ArcGIS, right? So in this example, we've got set feature pop-up, right? So you can create your own custom template and create a pop-up for that. We've got run command. So this run command is if you're using a workflow inside of the Geocortex viewer for HTML5, you can then access the SDK for the HTML5 viewer. So if I go to, let's go to docs.geocortex.com, go to the developer help and search up viewer commands. We'll go to the commands. So all of these commands, HTML5 viewer commands, can be invoked using the run command activity. If you're wanting to run an essentials workflow, again, we've got documentation on how to do that. Additionally, forms, tons of activities on working with forms. If you want to send a web request or parse URLs, if you want to convert different things to JSON, all of these are activities that our software developers have created to make it easy to just provide an input and get an output. And I don't want to go through all of these because there's a lot, but if you're wondering what a particular activity does, you'll see every activity here has this little help button, right? So if I'm interested on what the notes activity does, it's simply an activity that provides the ability to add annotation or comments to a workflow. So I can just add my notes, and we'll review, well, this is the properties panel, right? So every activity has its own properties panel. So here I've got these are all the properties associated with this activity. So the display name is notes. I could change that to say something else, maybe like testing, I don't know, annotation. And then I can add some notes about my workflow. So this is a sample workflow. And I'm just gonna clean up my design area. You can zoom out using the control and scroll buttons. So that's how you zoom out. Let's say I'm over, I don't know if I have a home key on here. If you get lost, there's some keyboards will have a home key. If you press that home key, it'll just take you right to the workflow design area. But I know all keyboards are a little bit different. What else is worth reviewing? So the file menu. So you look in the file menu, you'll see I can create a new workflow. And right off the bat, these are sample workflows that we've pre-configured and provided to everyone. So they range from adding a graphics to a map, performing some basic loops, buffering some geometry. So if I create the sample to buffer a geometry, I'll see a sample display form. It's got a geometry picker, and it's going to perform some buffering and add that buffer as markup to the map. Let's say I want to see how this workflow runs, okay? I can just click File, Save As, and I'll save this as buffer. And I'll click Save. Now if I want to see how a certain workflow runs, I can go to the Info tab, and you'll see my workflow has this URL. Actually, let's not even, I'll jump to the buffer later. Let's just start with a really, really basic workflow. So I'm going to go to my toolbox. Feel free to just follow me, and I'll just make sure I go really, really slow. So we're going to write the most basic workflow. So I'm going to write search for an alert activity, okay? So you can use this toolbox, this filter tool at the top, to search for different activities. I can also manually try to find the alert activity in here, but it's a lot easier if you know the name to just search for the activity. So if everyone's able to find this activity, we can then drag and drop it onto the surface. And you'll see wherever you drop it, it'll automatically connect to the start. So you can also delete the, you can also select these and delete it. So I can select the delete key. I don't think the backspace key will work. So if you are wanting to delete these connections, you're going to want to click the delete key. Okay, but I'm gonna drag it again. I can connect it to the left, or I can connect it to the right, or really wherever I want to connect it. So you guys see how I'm doing that?
There is no difference in two.
No, it's just, they're all just connecting to it. It's just how you want to organize your workflow. Yeah. So I might want to make it look like that. I like working just like top-down kind of approach, so I like connecting it to the top and maybe making it nice and clean. You can also click on an activity and use the arrow keys to move it around. Does everyone see that? Okay, nice. So the alert activity is very, very simple. All it does is it asks, so these are the properties, right? So if we wanted to, we can change the display name. This is just how the activity looks in Workflow Designer. It doesn't actually do anything. It's just making your workflow look nice. So I might just say alert hello world. So I know I'm creating an alert of saying hello world. It's always nice to start with hello world when you're developing these. So I can now enter some basic text, okay? You'll see these are the inputs for my alert activity. If I wanted to, I could also add a description. So I'll just say generates an alert saying hello world. So again, you can continue to self-document your workflows by writing these comments inside of these activities. I'm going to configure the input, and I can either just start typing hello world. So we're hard coding this value right now. So, and if you want to, you can use this expand tool if you want more space, okay? And the reason why I'm typing hello world is that it says the type is string. So if you're familiar with strings, they're just general text. It's a text string, right? We don't have to have any like quotes or anything like that, but this hello world is the exact same as if we were to go equals hello world and encapsulate that in a string. I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. So this is an equal sign. It might be hard to see. There we go, equals. This is the exact same as hello world, okay? You use the equal sign when you're wanting to create more complex string variable, or if you're wanting to connect inputs and outputs, and we'll be doing that in a little bit. So I'm just going to type in hello world, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit. If you even need more space, I think you can drag this thing in the bottom right up and down, right? So to create additional space. So does everyone see that, how I'm doing that? Yeah, okay. So I'm just hard coding a value, and now I want to save this so I can run it and see what it actually does. So I'll go File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Hello World. I might have one already saved as Hello World, so I'm just going to say Geomatic as well. And click Save. Now, the simplest way to run see what your workflow is going to look like is if we go to this Info tab. I'll just wait. Has everyone kind of saved their workflow and added Hello World?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll see here in the Info tab, there's this URL. Because I'm signed in as student 1, which is tied to Latitude Geographics ArcGIS Online Organization, I can view, if you just click view, it'll take me to that workflow that's stored inside of ArcGIS Online. So we'll see that we're automatically, I gotta sign out and sign in as a student 1. you'll see I didn't have permissions to access it. Sign out. I'm going to relaunch that again. It should prompt me to sign in. Yeah. So when it prompts me to sign in, I'll go to ArcGIS, sign in with my username, which is AGOL student1, and the password is training1. I can write it on the board if you forget, and I'll sign in. Here, I'll write it again. It's a training1. Is the password. So now you can see my hello world _geomatic workflow is being stored inside of my ArcGIS online organization. I can then share it with other people in my organization, or just maybe I'm just working on it in my own development, so I don't want to share it with anyone. So I can do that by clicking share and then choose to share with everyone, maybe just latitude geographics. And I'm not part of any groups, or I'm not like an administrator, so I can't share it to anyone. I'm not going to share it. I'm going to go back to workflow design. Have most people at least saved their workflow? You can also, if you don't want to select this whole URL, you can copy. That'll just copy it, and then I could also, if I wanted to, paste it as well, and it'll go to the ArcGIS Online. Now, the simplest way to run this is if I click Run in Sandbox. That'll open up our workflow sandbox. So it's in the Info tab, if you don't see that. It's in the Info, and then after, it's only available once you've saved your workflow. So once you've saved your workflow and you've got a URL, you can then click Run in Sandbox, and it'll take you to this, okay? So this is a sandbox environment where we can just test our workflow running in different JavaScript APIs. So if I want to test my workflow running in the ArcGIS API for JavaScript 3.x, I'm going to run my workflow. It's quite, again, the sandbox environment, it's kind of slow. But if you're just wanting to, I don't know, test a small thing, then we should see that I get an alert saying hello world, which was our hard-coded value that we just configured in that alert box, right? You'll see here, I've got a little message here saying Geocortex Workflow must be purchased for use in production applications. So we're just running the developer version, so that's why it shows up. You'll also see in the bottom right here, it also says a subscription is required for production use. And then you can go learn about pricing. If I wanted to, I can run it even without any map using, again, the ArcGIS API 4.x, or I could run a workflow using a 3D web scene using the 4.x API. This might take a little bit longer to load. I don't know about everyone's connection, but maybe avoid using this and just watch. I'm going to run my workflow, and again, we'll see that it works in Esri's 4.x API. So you're not having to rewrite a workflow that works in one or the other. They work on both platforms. Okay, so that's the easiest way. Let's add this simple workflow to Web AppBuilder. So I have a Web AppBuilder instance you all can access. I'm going to write the URL in Notepad again, because I'm kind of just doing this at my own speed now. So it's wabdemo.geocortex.com/webappbuilder. So I'll just throw that up here, okay? It's this if you can all read this, and then you'll be able to add your workflows to Web AppBuilder. So let me know when you're done.
Another one?
No, it's such a GUIs.
Dot. Dot. That's really weird. I haven't seen that ever. No, that's cool. I do not know. Can you use your you can drag, right? You can drag, right? Yeah, I've never seen that before.
I think that's
With what? No. No, it shouldn't be a problem with. So this one it works, and then the other one it doesn't. It shouldn't be a problem with authentication. I'm thinking it's like a browser setting or something. Yeah. Yeah. I'll explain how to do that in a second. So let's just first add this this workflow to Web AppBuilder, okay? So did everyone get into webdemo.webappbuilder? Sorry. And did you guys encounter this set portal URL? Did anyone see this? So you just click continue, and then sign in with your ArcGIS account again. So I'm going to sign in with AGOL student 1 and training 1, and then sign in. And now I'm inside of Web AppBuilder. I think it's it must be like a browser. What version are you using? What version of Firefox are you using? Is it the newest version though? Okay, here, let me see. So I go to list settings. Can we see these version? 62. I don't know. It might. I'm guessing it's some kind of browser setting, something like that. Huh? Is it okay if you just follow for the moment? Because I want to be aware of our time here. So is everyone in Web App Builder? So we're going to create a new default 2D app, web app. So I imagine all of you are probably pretty familiar with Web App Builder. I'm going to call this Geomatic. It can be any name you want. And I'm going to click OK. Did I get it created? Yes, okay. These are from Canada. Yeah. For being good students. It's maple syrup. Nice. Are most people at this stage? Yeah? Okay, sweet. So we're going to go to Widget, and you can set a widget here, or I'm going to set mine in the controller. So I'm going to add a widget. And within this Web App Builder instance, we've added our custom workflow widget, okay? So this is, they're pretty much the same widget. This workflow one docks it in a side panel. And then this is a workflow modal widget, which is one that you can drag around. So I'm going to add a workflow. I'm going to select the workflow widget. I can call the name of my workflow Hello World. I can change the icon. And I want to choose my workflow, okay? So because I'm signed in with the same identity as my one that I signed in with Workflow Designer, I've got access to my content, right? So we just created this Hello World workflow. I can also look at all the workflows that have been shared to me within my organization. So these are all the workflows there's lots that my organization has shared with me. I can see any workflows that have been shared in my groups or public ones available. So maybe all the ones that we've shared to everyone in ArcGIS Online. So you can see there's lots of public workflows, right? A lot of samples. I'm going to go to my content and select my workflow and click OK. You'll see we've got, if I zoom in, you'll see it's referencing my item ID in ArcGIS Online, and I'll click OK. So now I've got my little workflow widget in the top right here. I can click it, and it'll just say, Hello World. So let me know once you've completed that. And we're going to start building on top of this workflow, and yeah. It's always good to just get it working and then building it. Huh?
That is a perfect shot.
Perfect.
I haven't tried it, so I don't know. Just let me know when you guys have finished so I can continue. So I guess I'll show you guys what a modal workflow looks like as well. So maybe I'll add a second widget, and I'll select this modal one. I'll click OK, and I'll just add the same workflow, my Hello World geomatic one, and I'll click OK. And if I add that, we'll get Hello World. It'll look a little bit different. See, this one, it's more of like a panel view. This is a modal view. When we start working with display forms, you'll be able to see more of a larger difference. So are most people have Hello World running within Web AppBuilder? Okay, so let's go back to Geocortex Workflow Designer, and let's create a display form. So if you look on the screen here, I'm going to just make some room for my display form. So I'm going to put this alert down at the bottom and delete this section. I'm going to go to my toolbox on the left and search for display form. You'll be searching for this activity a lot. I can drag it on to the start menu by either just putting it on top of the activity, or I can put my mouse over each of these arrow keys. So if I put it on the right, it'll then connect to the right. If I put it on the bottom, it'll connect to the bottom. And if I put it on the left, you'll see it kind of goes blue. It'll go to the left. I think if you just hover over and drop, it'll default to going down. And then we can drag the bottom and connect it to our alert. So let me know once you've added that. So again, I can like change the name of my display form. So maybe I'll have it call it like I don't know, user form, and have a description. So I want to take a user's value as input. So I'm going to double click the display form to begin customizing it. So here we've got the main components is this form title and this footer. This form title refers to, they have element IDs. So this is called a header and this is called a footer. And you can see the footer has additional properties. So it's got buttons and events. We'll be working with these events. And you can make certain items visible or invisible. So you'll see these are all the activities that are specific to display forms, okay? So we can add a autocomplete box, we can add a button bar, a date picker, we can add a geometry picker, a file picker if you have to get a user to submit a photo. We can add a list box. There's lots of these that we can add. Radio groups, so you can really customize what your form looks like. You can remove these form items by using these little properties here at the top and just selecting delete. You can also click on one and use the delete key to remove it. So I'm going to just delete some of these. And so I'm just at my default form. I can change the form title by just saying go into the properties of the header element and say enter a value. Now I can add a text box, okay? So you're likely going to have a lot of forms where you're getting input from an end user, okay? So here I might want to ask my user to enter a string. Doesn't really matter. Please enter a string. Now, in display forms, we support markup. So if you want to stylize some of these strings, you'll see I can add underscores on the before and after to make it italicized. If I want to make it bold, I'll add 2 underscores, and now it's bold. If you see that, so that's called markdown. If I want to make it bold and italic, I can then just have 3 underscores. This is documented in our docs, Geocortex documentation center, so I can search markdown, and we'll see, we should be able to find the different references for how we can, I don't know, if I go to reference, let's search up maybe keyboard shortcuts. Somewhere in here we can find markdown. Add formatting. So italics, bolds. So here you can find how you can configure your forms. I'm going to go back, and we can also enter in a default value. So this text box element has its own set of properties. So I might want to have a default value of hello world, and we can also have a tooltip as well. So enter a value. I can also make it invisible or visible. I can make it required. So we're already starting to make our forms have validation. And you can also set up unique rules with validation as well. We can make it read-only, so they can only read it, they can't interact with it. And enabled is very similar to that respect. So we've got a form that asks the user to enter a value. And
Can you show events?
yes, I will. I'll show events really soon. First, we might want to get that input from that form, right? So rather than hard coding an alert, let's present an alert with whatever we type into that text box, okay? So in order to get like variables or values from like a form, for example, or any activity, we use like a JavaScript notation. So if I type in equals, I can see all of the activity elements within my workflow. If I wanted to add like buffer geometry, for example, you'll see this ID is buffer1, and I enter in equals. One sec, let me see. If I enter in equals, you'll see buffer1 becomes available, right? So if I click buffer1 and click dot, I can see all of the outputs that the buffer geometry activity has. But we'll just start off really simple. So I'll go inside of my alert. I'm going to click equals, and here I can select my my form 1. Okay, so we're going to want to go inside of our form and get that text box value. So I'll click form 1, and if I click a dot, I can then see all the additional properties that are available to form 1. So the 2 properties that are available are result and state. The result refers to what value that's set in the button. So I'll review that just after this, but we're currently interested in the state of the form. So if we click state and add another dot, you'll see these are all the element IDs within our form. So we've got our footer, our header, and our text box. I can click my text box 1, click add a dot, and these are the additional properties that are available to me. And we've got little like it'll say the type as well. So here we can see enabled is Boolean, so it'll either tell me if it's true or false, but we're interested in the value. Okay. So now we've configured a form. We've asked the user to enter in a value, and all we're doing is we're generating an alert with that value. So we'll go File, Save. The nice thing is we can now go back to Web App Builder, and we don't need to refresh anything. We can just rerun our workflow, and we've got our nice display form, and it's going to ask me to enter in a string. We've got our default text, but I'm going to write hello geomatic, and click submit, and we're now presenting the value that we just entered in our form. Very nice.
Sluts.
Yeah. Very easy to use though, right? It makes sense. Okay. Now the difference between the two, so this was the regular workflow widget. This is the modal workflow widget. So you'll see I can drag this around. I don't like this interface, but you might have certain applications that or customers who like this kind of functionality. So to each their own. But again, it's the same workflow, just running in 2 different widgets. Okay, is everyone good? Okay, so yeah. So let's we'll do that. I'll review that right now. So I kind of hinted at what dot results was, right? So I'm going to remove this connector to my display form, and I'm going to move my alert a little bit further down, and I'll go into my toolbox, okay? Now, you'll notice this workflow, if I click cancel, it says hello world as well. We don't want that, right? We want it to not say that. We want it to just exit if we say cancel, right? So I'm going to add an if statement and connect that to my display form, okay? And the if statement's condition is we essentially want it to say if the form's result is submit, we want to generate an alert. If the form's result is anything else other than submit, so cancel, we want to exit. So we can simply click equals form1 dot result. That's all we need, and then we can say equals. Now there is some internal debate on the proper syntax for this. Some people use 3 equals, some use 2 equals. You guys are the developers, but I think either option works in this example. I don't think 1 equals will. I usually use 3. And I'm going to say if form1.result equals in a string. Anytime you're using equals, you have to encapsulate a string with parentheses. So I'll say if the form.result equals submit and click OK. So that I'll make this a little bit bigger so you all can see that. And I'll let you know where I'm getting submit from. Pardon? Yep. So why does it say submit, right? The reason why. Yeah. So if we go into our display form, we'll see the footer, the buttons that are configured here is called submit, but the value of that button is lowercase submit. Okay? If I wanted to say if someone clicks cancel, do something else, I would say form.result equals cancel. And notice it's lowercase. So we're using case sensitivity. So it should be lowercase. So that's where I got that submit from. So if I submit, if that's true, then I want to present an alert. If I don't select submit, I can exit, exit the workflow. So I can just exit it. So I'm just gonna, I like making my workflows look a little bit nice, so I'm just gonna move this on top. Looks like that, and move this over here. Zoom out a little bit. So now, I know I went through that maybe a little fast or maybe a little slow. I will click File Save, and I'm just gonna wait until you guys can see what I did. So it's form1.result equals submit. Yeah. And that's what my workflow looks like. So on one hand, we're generating alert. On one hand, we're exiting. So
Can you add the string to the alert?
which the submit string?
The alert, add the string plus this value.
Sure. Yeah. If we wanted to, I could then add this plus equals or we should be able to do plus dollar form1 dot result dot result, and we should get that. So now if I rerun it, we'll get hello world submit, and we'll get hello world submit. You could clean that up maybe by adding a plus a space, so there. So these pluses, these are concatenation. Yeah, so that's one way you can combine forms, but also you can use temperate literals. Are you guys familiar with temperate literals as well? So you can use those as well in here. So I can click Control S and rerun my workflow, and I get hello everyone, and click submit, and I get hello everyone space submit, which is my results. One really useful activity is the log activity. If you'll see when we use this JavaScript notation, so equals form1 dot, I'll get a list of options, right? Sometimes, and we call this code complete. Sometimes our code complete doesn't show you every property available. If you want to inspect every single property available, you want to use a log activity. So I'll just quickly show you. If after our display form, I'm just going to move this up, I can add a log activity. So I'll go to my toolbox and type in log and drag that on top of my display form, and then connect my log to my if. Currently, you guys see there's this X here, right? At the bottom, we've got, it'll tell us all of the errors within our workflow. So it says the log, a message, a required input is missing, right? So if I click that, it'll take me to the activity. And here I can see the log activity, a message input is missing. So what I'm going to do, what the log does is anything you send to it, it'll pretty much generate all of the properties in JSON that you can view within, like when you're using developer tools in a browser. So I've got my form 1. What is available inside of my form? all I have to do is say equals form1, and that's all. So that will let me see what properties are available inside of my form. So you just need to have that equals form1 if you want to see absolutely everything. If I click File, Save, and then go back to my Web AppBuilder instance and use my developer tools and go inside of my console and run my workflow, it's after I submitted my form, I had my log. So if I click Submit, I'll see this JSON, or I don't know, these properties that are all of the properties available within my form. So this is actually like what we're using and retrieving when we're running our workflow. So you saw I had my form1 dot results. So if that equals submit, then it does something, right? So my results was submit. And if we wanted to, we could go into our events, the actors, the state. So here we can see the state. So we had form1.results and form1.state, right? So we have our footer, our header, and our text box 1. When I clicked text box 1, we saw I was able to select my value, right? Inside of here, we're saying equals text box 1 dot, these are all the properties, right? We're essentially, this is equal to this. Let me just increase the size, sorry. So the top is form1 dot state dot text box 1 dot value, right? And this is our hello world. So when you're developing workflows, very, very useful to use the log activity, especially when you start working with like queries and entering feature sets. Really, really useful to just know like if you're actually getting information back. One of the most, I'd say, apart from, I almost use log activities more than display forms because they're just all over the place. They're really, really useful. I think now is probably a good time to show you some events. So let's make this form a dynamic form. We can do that using events, and events really show the power of forms, these form events. So I'm going to go to my toolbox, and I'm going to add, let's add a checkbox, okay? I'm going to add a checkbox to the top of my form. And what I might want to do is, you noticed on all of those workflows that I showed, I had a description. And when I checked the description, it showed additional information. Let me just quickly show web demo. Sorry. So for example, in this demonstration, I've got a little description checkbox at the top, and when I check it, it displays some text, right? So we're going to configure and see how easy it is to just make something dynamic, okay? Super, super simple. So I'm going to go back to my workflow designer, and I'm going to want to present the user with this text box when I check the when I check the checkbox. So I first want to make this text box not visible. And then we're going to, when we check the checkbox, we're going to set the visible property to make it show or display to an end user. So here we can see there's a number of properties available for the checkbox. I'm going to change the label and just say check to show text box. And you can also, choose the default visibility, but I'm going to make it unchecked, and I'm making it visible. Now you'll see here there's these events, okay? Different form activities have different events. In this example, the checkbox activity has the load and the change event. The load event is fired when the entire display form loads and it'll do something. So you could have it so when the display form loads, it does some sort of functionality. I typically use the change event. So the change event gets fired anytime property of the form element changes. So an example would be going from checked to unchecked, or entering in a value, or maybe getting a geometry, or selecting a date or something like that. Those would be change events. So I'm going to add a new change event on my checkbox. Now we're launching pretty much a workflow. We like to call them sub-workflows within a workflow. Okay, so you can get really complicated here. You can go really, really deep. You could have workflows within workflows within workflows within workflows, but in this example, we're just going to go one layer deep. So here we're in the change event, and I'm going to want to have an if statement, okay? So I want to say if this form is checked, then show the text box. If it's unchecked, hide the checkbox. So I'm going to go, my condition for my if statement is equals if form1 dot state, and we'll see we now have our checkbox available. So if my checkbox 1 is checked, then show a form element, right? So I'll just, does everyone see that? Okay. So I'm now going to search for show form element. That's an activity we have. It's in the form section. And I'm going to drag that over here. And I'm going to, I like having it top down, so I'm just going to move that over here. So if it's checked, show form element. The parameter for is the element ID. Where do we get that? The element ID, you're going to have to go back to the user form, and this is the element ID. So it's text box 1, because we're wanting to show that. So I'm just going to select that, copy, and then you can either go down here and click edit to go back into your change event, or use this little menu here and say edit change event. So now I'm going to add my text box 1. So I want to show my form element, okay? I'm going to save this. So now when I rerun my workflow, we've got check to show text box. If I check it, it shows. However, if I uncheck it, it doesn't do anything. That's because I haven't hidden the form element as well, right? So I'll go back to my workflow, and I'm going to want to say if it's not checked. So if this is false, I want to I think it's hide form element. So I'll just drag that and toss it in there. And again, I want this to be text box 1. So let me just zoom out so you all can see that. It's pretty easy to do, right? Yeah. So I'll yeah. So if I now rerun my workflow, I can show and I can hide. And I can, again, enter in hello everyone and click submit, and I've got hello everyone. And oh, I forgot to show, if I click cancel, it now exits because we added that exit functionality. Okay. Another common thing is showing drop-down lists and having those be populated with like a query. So you might have like a drop-down list of all the all the like census tracts within the viewer or something like that. That's a common thing to have in the viewer. So if you'll see in this example, my search crimes, I have a drop-down list of all of the bureaus in LA County, right? That's performing a query to ArcGIS server and displaying those. So maybe we'll do that. Let's actually work with actual data. So I'm going to go back to my web app builder and I'm going to add a web map. So I'm going to choose web map and I'll go to public and let's look for training. And I'm going to add a web map. And click OK. Let me know if I'm going too fast. I'm happy to slow down a bit or, yeah. So I'm going to add this LA County training web map. And now we actually have some features that we can start playing around with, maybe interact with, right? So in this example, if I want to get see what features I have, I can click more details, and then I can see the list of all my features available, my layers available inside of my web app builder instance, right? So I'm going to go back to my workflow, and I'm going to go to my display form, and let's add a drop-down list. So we've got a drop-down list here. It's a common thing. Now within a drop-down list, you can configure these manually. So I can have like option 1 could be like, I don't know, Esri Canada, Esri C. Option 2 could be Esri Inc., Esri I, and so on. I'm not going to configure that. But if I click File Save, you don't have to do this. I'm just showing you. And reran my workflow. Over here, I have a drop-down list, and we've just hard-coded those values available. You'll probably, there's a lot of the time you do want to hard-code values, but a lot of the time you also want these to generate dynamically. So you can do either or. So I'm going to go back to my workflow, and here we have the option to configure manually, or we can use a sub workflow. So when I use the sub workflow, all my manual configured options are going to be deleted. I'm going to click OK. I can now start from scratch to populate this, but we also provide a template to make it really easy to populate all of this, all of your features in here. So I'm going to click. So I'm using a sub workflow, and I'm going to use ArcGIS Query. So here we've got 3 activities that we pre-populate to make it really easy for you to get set up. So the first one, you'll see in the toolbox, again, probably one of the most common activities is the query layer activity. You're always wanting to query a map service to do some kind of functionality, right? So again, if you wanted to search for that, you could search query layer, and it's in the GIS section, and you can drag it. And it's got its own unique properties. We're already pre-populating it, so it can run without having to do anything. In this example, we're using these are all the properties for the query layer activity. I believe they match the properties for the query layer at the ArcGIS REST endpoint. So if you go, for example, if we go to this URL, we'll see, and we scroll down and go query. These are a bunch of properties, right? I think a lot of the same properties are included in here. So it's always good to test your query at the ArcGIS REST endpoint, and then maybe test it within Workflow, just to confirm that it's going to work. So in this example, we're querying this service. It's a census service where 1 equals 1. That's going to return everything. And we're not going to return geometry because we're just showing it in a list. And we're going to have some output fields. I'm going to have the output field as the state name. And that's the only output field I want. And we're not doing anything else. You'll see here, there's this activity called get form element items from features. The output, if I just get an alert, to show you, the output of the query layer activity is a Esri.graphic. Are you guys familiar with working with feature sets? Yeah? Okay, yeah, so you know graphic is like pretty much one feature, features is multiple features, and then results is the entire feature set, so you can also get like the geometry, spatial reference, and stuff. Okay, so these are the outputs of the query 1 activity, so I'll go, for example, equals query 1 dot results, or would give me that, and then I can search for features, geometry type, spatial reference, and so on. So just to let you know, we're using the output of the query 1 activity, and we're using that as an input into the get form element items 1 activity. So this activity requires features. You can see it's a list of graphics. So we're entering query 1.features. The label is the state name, and I'll also have the population as well. And we're going to have the value as the population. And then we can set the form element items. This is used to pre-populate the drop-down list. So in this example, the element ID is drop-down list 1. You can see we actually know that that's the element ID because we're inside of the sub-workflows. So that's one way you can quickly see the element ID, but it's also up here, drop-down list 1. So I'm gonna go to edit option sub workflow, and that looks good. And then these items are the output of the form element items 1. Okay? And again, we provide this template, so you don't need to kind of remember how to do this. So I'm gonna click Control S, and now if I rerun my workflow, I've got a drop-down list, and it has all of the states being dynamically returned from that service. Okay? We might want to change that so it's an actual, so it's like these census tracts or something. The census tracts within this web map. So again, in order to do that, we'd go to more details, which is right here. I've already got it open. Maybe we're looking for the census tracts. Let me sign in. Should be able to get the census tract. Latitude geo. It's a public web. Oh. Okay, how's everyone doing? Do you guys want to break for coffee at all, or continue going? I don't know. We're just getting into it.
In the drop-down list,
Yeah.
You can make the sort.
Do drop-down list. Can you make what?
Sort.
Yeah, you can. So in the query layer activity, I think there's a order by fields. So if we order by state name, and control save. And so I think it was Hawaii. If we rerun it, we'll see it's Alabama. It's all sorted out alphabetically, right? Yeah.
Ah.